And welcome to our webinar on understanding resilience as a business leader in difficult times. I'm delighted that we are joined this morning by Valerie O'Keefe of Clarity VP, and she will share with us insights and tips on how to maintain and strengthen our resilience in times of crisis. Valerie is the CEO of Clarity VP Consulting, and for many years she has helped business owners and teams to maximize their strengths and achieve significant results. With a former career in found and her background in behavioral psychology to work with clients across a broad range of sectors. Just to say housekeeping, we will circulate Valerie's slides and the webinar recording this afternoon, and we have muted your microphones now for convenience and less noise interference. I've already spoken too much, so just without further ado, I'd like to hand over to you, Valerie. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much, Sven, and thank you again for asking me to participate on this webinar here for the Small Firms Association today. I'm absolutely delighted to be here this morning to talk about a very important subject for all of us at the moment. I suppose by way of background, before I kind of jump into the slides, you know, why did I kind of look at the subject a little bit deeper recently? And I suppose over the last couple of weeks when COVID-19 began, and with speaking with my clients and colleagues, you know, there was a very palpable and justifiable anxiety around what this pandemic was going to result for all of us, both professionally and personally. And, you know, I started then to explore the subject of resilience, which obviously I would have studied over the years, but go a little deeper in relation to what it means in order to kind of really understand how we react in a crisis. And the reason to do it was probably twofold. One was to support my clients and come back with some ideas in relation to frameworks and, as you say, coping tactics. But secondly, then to look and see, you know, what else could I do here in this space that could share and reach out to people, not just with my clients, but the broader audience. And that's why I'm delighted to be doing so here today, again, sharing tips and tools in this subject. I'm a great believer, for those of you who do know me, in that, you know, the more you're informed about a subject, then, you know, you're able to make better choices about the information, and with better choices you do get better results. So I do believe that, you know, having a better understanding of what resilience means and how we react and interact with this, and then what choices we make as a result of that will really be to our benefit if we put some structure in relation to this. So I'm delighted to be running this seminar here today. I've written a couple of articles recently, and there's references there for your readers and your listeners to kind of tap into later on should they want to. But for the purposes of this morning, I am going to look at three key things. One is, what's resilience? So what is it? What does it mean? What's various definitions going around? But what happens to us then in a crisis? How do we interact or react as a result of a crisis? Second area is about how to overcome negativity. So how do we take back that control, and how do we ensure that we put into practice certain thought patterns in relation to moving forward as best we can? And the third area I wanted to share was, again, moving forward, what does that mean? And I wanted to share some ideas in relation to how your listeners and your members might move forward from this crisis in a very practical way. And I want to share with you the thoughts and ideas around a 90-day plan, which I've devised a template, which I'm very happy to share again as well as part of this seminar. Okay, so let's kind of jump into what is resilience. And as I say, there's lots of definitions knocking around, and these are two that kind of resonate with me. You can see them there. One is the ability for an individual to properly adapt to stress and adversity. And the second is being ready for any eventuality. Now, obviously, you know, it's easier said than done at the moment. And, you know, we're humans first and we're business people after that. And certainly what's happened over the last couple of weeks has certainly rocked all of us in relation to where we are. So, you know, it's easier said than done that we can bounce back, but definitely that there are definitely tips and angles to prove that we can. But before I jump to the bouncing back piece, I wanted to kind of go a little deeper in relation to what does resilience mean in a crisis and what happens to us? How do we react? I was listening to a brilliant podcast by Professor Ian Robertson, and he actually, Sven, runs the Brain Institute in Trinity, and he talked a little bit more around what happens with stress and what is stress. When something occurs, you know, outside our control, there's a perception then that the demand it places on all of us exceeds our ability then to actually deal with things. And this then gives rise to the emotion of anxiety. Anxiety then, as I said just on the slide there, is a great disruptor. It absolutely loves taking over our brain. So it completely and utterly takes our distraction or our attention and gets us distracted into things that we, naturally will go down certain rabbit holes, and we'll start to kind of really get totally bombarded with various different emotions and feelings in relation to this. So when this happens and it occurs, and it's happened to myself a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure it's happened to everybody, that at the time of anxiety, you're kind of distracted, and then your resources for making decisions or for moving forward, even though people are saying, well, we'll bounce back from this, you can be stuck here a little bit longer than perhaps you need to be, and that's a good thing to be. It's not a good thing to be. So some problems then can become bigger than we think. And then on top of that, then we're not meeting people as informally anymore. And I'm a great believer in the social element as well of business, but also in our private lives. We're social animals at the end of the day. So we can find ourselves and feel a little bit isolated as a result. If we go even further, there's a great saying that anxiety is a way of introducing you to your weakest self. And I certainly, when this hit a couple of weeks ago, it was true to think that certain feelings started to occur in relation to previous issues or challenges I had in my life, both personally or professionally. And, the weakest self can surprise you. This feeling of being afraid and fear is an emotion, disappointment is an emotion. And we can reflect then and see, back to something that happened previously that even people don't want to talk about because, it was a painful time in their lives or their careers. And equally, when you think about, Sven, the recession isn't that long ago, there's still a lot of people feel quite raw about what happened there. So it's important to recognize and acknowledge these feelings, but equally then to recognize that, that these old wounds were based on old beliefs. And that we've certainly grown a lot. Every week that goes by, every month that goes by, we get stronger. We get stronger because we've actually experienced new experiences. And as professionals, it's important to believe that, to recognize these feelings, but that to not let stay too long in this space if we can. So it is important to move forward. Now, the great news is that taking back control will give you that sense of, perspective, and it'll also give you that sense of trajectory and movement and momentum. And I'm a great believer, again, in taking back control, but control that within your remit. We know we can't control what's happening around us at the moment, but what we can do as professionals is we can control how we interact, how we engage, or how we might influence what's happening. And, that's a really good starting point. So taking your power back and not letting the external conditions have your power is one step forward in your new trajectory towards moving on and moving forward from this. Another, I suppose, interesting fact is that we have assets, whether we realize it or not, within ourselves that actually help us to become even more resilient. And the brain is one of those. Like, the brain takes up 20% of the energy of the body, and it's a muscle. And like any muscle in the body, it's important that we train it. Now, whether we like it or not, the area of neuroscience is actually massive, you can imagine. But from the pieces that I've read, it's important to, I suppose, realize that, we are wired for negativity to begin with, which isn't great. But, the way the brain works is the neuroplasticity has the ability of the brain to form new connections and pathways and change how its circuits are wired. And that is developed over time through experience. So they talk about positive or negative emotions and feelings, and it can cause neurons in the brain to fire, and that if they fire together, they can wire together. So if you're in a situation where you're constantly, around a scenario that's quite negative, or there's no way out, or you feel that those neurons can stay together and can stay kind of wired together, as they say. But the great news is, again, about moving forward, is that we can rewire some of those new beliefs and behaviors in the brain in order to help us move forward. And this takes practice. It takes And it takes time, it takes practice, and in some cases, you know, I'm coaching people and supporting people in relation to moving on here. But it's great. I certainly take a bit of comfort in the fact that actually I have some of this ability inside me. And actually, as well, when we realise it, and it dawns on us, we're probably more resilient than we actually give ourselves credit for. So actually, in a lot of cases, I'm sure a lot of the listeners here today have moved forward slightly already, but don't be worried if you're still stuck in this area, that you just believe that you're still nearly paralyzed by what's going on around you. And you can't suppress some of that by just looking at a template and somebody forcing you to move forward. You have to work through how that might happen, but certainly the brain can help you in that regard. So how do we start by doing that, and how do we overcome this, and what are the first kind of steps forward? Well, first of all, it's creating that clear mental space and finding time in your day or in your week where you can actually stand back and understand what's going on, and then take back that control, as I mentioned earlier. This takes time, and it also, you know, you have to allocate time, but it doesn't need hours and hours and hours of thought. I believe that, again, if you could allow a certain part of your day or your week that you allocate 10% of your week or 20% of your time in relation to getting, you know, comfortable with what this means to you. And then, of course, you have to go back to running your businesses. And I know that at the moment, certainly running a small business, there's a lot of demands on us as owner managers at the moment. So allocating time for having clear mental space is, again, I know easier said than done, but it's absolutely vital. So again, what are the tips? There are 7 I want to share with you today in terms of moving forward. And again, you know, as owner managers within business and leaders within business, you have to start with yourself, and then you look at the team. It's easier to lead a team when you know where you're going yourself. So even in terms of your own trajectory of where the business is going, what you want to happen, what's your kind of desired future state for your small business over the next couple of months, and then obviously beyond that is really critical too. But for the moment, you have to start with yourself and make sure that you stay really fit in this regard. So what are the professor, he talks about creating routine and smaller goals. We all recognize this, that when we're out of control or things are out of control, it's not a nice place to be. So the first tip around that I would give the leader, your listeners, would be around, you know, devising what that structure is and devising a number of smaller goals. And smaller goals are good at the moment. Certainly they're working for me. You know, you're walking here before you can run, and recognizing that actually, you know, putting down a number of smaller goals, even on a daily basis, what might they be, and then ticking them off. And in the evening time, you recognize, you know, I've achieved a lot here today because you took control over certain goals that you knew you could deliver today. And that's a very good starting point. Keeping a positive morning routine. I'm such a great believer in getting up early. There's a great book by a fantastic guy, Robin Sharma, actually I'm referencing him there, called The 5 a.m. Club, where he talks about getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. The hour between 5 and 6 is that fantastic time for you to kind of, you know, take 20 minutes of exercise, 20 minutes of journaling, and 20 minutes of reading. And, you know, I know as business owners, it's very hard to find time during the day for any of this stuff, but certainly that early morning rising has really helped me over the last couple of months, before even COVID-19, in terms of preparing myself for my day and making sure that I focus in on the right things and have a sense of trajectory of the day of what I want to achieve. So that morning routine is critical. And I know certainly a lot of you will have, you know, perhaps get out for a run or a walk in the morning. I would really encourage you to continue to do that. It really clears the head. Number 3 is having a wise and selective view of the news. You know, certainly when this started, the news was coming at us all the time, and it's very hard not to get in I suppose, distracted with what it was telling us, because it was really shocking, some of what we were reading and we were hearing. But again, taking back control. You have control. You can listen to the 1 o'clock news, you could listen to the 6 o'clock news, or you can listen to the 9 o'clock news. But listening to the news constantly, you know, my advice would be to pull back a little bit from that, certainly at the moment. 4 is avoiding toxic people right now and focus your attention on people who give you energy. I'm not saying that people around you necessarily are toxic. It's actually quite a strong word. Well, what I mean is that there will be people around you at the moment that are going through their own anxiety, and they may be relying on you to kind of offload or download their anxiety to you and for you to come up with some solutions and to help them. There's definitely a part that all of us have to play in helping those close to us to support them in dealing with this at the moment, because everybody's going through it. But what I mean is, if there are times where you can give, that attention to somebody, but then you need then to have time for yourself. Even, when I would think of, various different people at the moment, or, WhatsApp groups and whatever. And so it's all well-meaning, but there are times when I need to switch off my phone because I need to focus back on my business, and I need to focus back on what I need to be doing as a leader as I move my business forward in the shorter term. I would also add that again, I believe we've become a generation of being distracted. So again, Robin Sharma talks about you can be distracted with your devices and, being stimulated by constant feeds of various different things, or you could be legendary, right? Now, legendary is a great word, of course, but, I just think, yeah, are there times that, we take the easy route of being distracted because at the moment we're trying to cope with everything, and actually it's a nice happy release of kind of energy. And don't get me wrong, there are times when it's nice to just put on the headphones and listen to a really great album that you love, or music. But you know what I mean in terms of that distracted piece. You can waste our lives looking at news feeds and various different feeds. That's all I'm saying. Over communicate is number 5, and really what I'm talking about there is maintaining and protecting people's hope. So coming back now as a leader of a small business owner, small team you have, the big team you have, it is a very important time for you as a leader to kind of, to dial up that to come into the limelight and to really act as a leader. Again, some readings I've been looking at recently talk about the victimhood or being a leader. Sometimes victims can look for excuses, or this is too much for me, or I don't have the skills, or they look to blame. Or leaders just take responsibility. And I know that a lot of the listeners this afternoon or this morning will definitely want to be kind of positioning themselves as that leader who takes responsibility, but that takes time and takes planning. So maintaining and protecting people's hope is key. And it's an opportunity for us to build leaders at the moment as well. I have a small team. I'm sure you guys have small teams or big teams, but this is an opportunity for you to show and to demonstrate to people around us who might be a little bit more junior or less experienced that actually we will get through this, and to protect people's hope in relation to the next phase, and to build confidence, both to stay strong in yourselves and to not underestimate the strength that you have within yourself to begin with, and then to emanate that out through your actions and behaviors with your team. Number 6 is journaling, and again, journaling is all about jotting down things that resonate with you, or at the moment, if there are still pieces of this going on that are really stressful for you, that to write down, things that are annoying you or stressing you. And that's a great opportunity to get things down on paper. But again, don't dwell on it too much. My advice would be, if you write it down, sometimes I will do this myself. I'll write it down and I'll throw it into the fire and I'll burn it afterwards. But, this is back to not suppressing some of these real tangible feelings you have at the moment. But journaling, so in relation to disappointment or fear, but equally journaling around, the process and what's likely to happen. So again, in your morning routine, it might be to jot down a couple of things you want to achieve today. And also it might be that, following reading an article or reading a book, that you start to journal or deconstruct what that passage in the book meant to you. And then how can you use elements of that to become even stronger, more focused, and more relevant as a leader as you lead your business forward. Number 7 then is to use the time to develop your skills and competencies. Now, I know that there's a lot of people talk about doing guitar lessons and all this great stuff, and I have a piano in the other room there, and I should really be going back to that piano. But what I mean is, certainly if it's a hobby, great. But as business leaders, there's an opportunity perhaps to read a little bit more about leadership, about what are the key characteristics of leaders. What have other great leaders done at a time of crisis, and how have they moved their teams forward with great gusto and with great confidence? What was the secret sauce there in relation to that? Or it might be in relation to resilience itself, and it could be any of these subjects. But again, you know, you have a great opportunity at the moment to take perspective of what's happened, certainly, but also to use this now around, you know, shifting the mindset, creating those new pathways in relation to your brain around the art of the possibility, and then to use the ecosystem you have around you. I'm sure if we did allow people to speak in here, and I asked a few of you to mention 2 or 3 people that have really helped you in your business, that you count on, that you can trust. You know, it's amazing when you start to think, well, oh God, yeah, I've got 2 or 3 people already around me, so that's a great starting point with your plan. So not to waste this opportunity at the moment to kind of look at the ecosystem you have around you, all the great supports around you, and the resilience you have within yourself to actually move on now from this and to plan over the next, you know, even 90 days, which I'm going to come to now in a second. You know, I know there's a tendency to think about, well, what am I going to do next year, or what am I going to do in September? You know, but I believe, again, in my experience of corporate strategy over the years, you know, sometimes it's about it again, taking control over 90 days, it's 3 months. It's not that long, but there's a huge amount that you could do in that time. But if you need to put it into, you know, a step-by-step process. And, you know, if we were having a lovely coffee and another lovely webinar, Sven, in 3 months' time, and having a really nice coffee here, and we asked some of the people who were listening in today to see, you know, what really worked for you and what really worked over these 3 months that you kind of thought may not have happened, because they put it into a plan and they followed through on it and they were sharing it with us. Wouldn't that be great? So I'm going to finish up on the 90-day plan. I suppose, again, this was back to talking with my clients, and I'd heard Enda McNulty, who was a great guy I worked with over the years, speak about 90 days in another webinar, and it reminded me again how much this really resonated with me. So when I was speaking to some of my clients, they said, God, I love that idea, Valerie, but what exactly will I put down under the 90-day plan? So I decided then to just devise this 90-day template. It's an aid memoir. It's certainly not an exhaustive list of questions, but I've broken them down into 8 topic areas for, again, as the leader of the small business that might be able to help and prompt you as you take your business forward. They're listed there, as you can see, of everything, again, starting with yourselves. Leaders, has to start with you. What are the top priorities for you over the next 3 months? What are the top 3 goals, actually, that you want to ensure you achieve over the next 90 days? I go to the financials then, and we talk about the obvious then in relation to small business, where you're at, cash flow, cash in your bank account. You know, how are you going to get paid? Really, you know, they're sensitive questions at the moment, but again, you need to have a plan around them. Staff, obviously, they're absolutely critical. So again, I mentioned earlier around maintaining and protecting their hope, but also perhaps look at an opportunity now to get the staff involved in some of the potential solutions that you might have to move forward with in relation to your business. You know, this is an opportunity as well for people to be more agile, perhaps, and to pivot in relation to their role, their job, their business. And that is a really important part as well about staying relevant to your client base. Certainly things are moving, so you need to be able to, and I know you have the wherewithal in order to be agile yourselves, but getting the team involved in some potential new bolt-on added value opportunities for your business. Clients, a great boss of mine, Jerry McCrahan, he was a great boss of mine, and he used to say, you know, clients make our paydays possible. How true is that? So it's really critical that, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of the listeners now are reaching out to your clients on a regular basis and just extending that hand of support, even when your clients may not want to engage at the moment for other reasons. But people will remember, and again, back to your team and yourself, people will remember how you behaved during this time. And there's a real opportunity for you. You know, I know how I want would like to be remembered. And again, in my career, I worked with people during a crisis that disappeared. You know, they went into a cave and they weren't to be seen. And we got leaders emerging on the floor that had no title or, you know, had no real authority, but people started to gravitate over towards them because they needed to see that leadership. So again, you know, I'd like to think that certainly to be remembered by a leader who was calm and gave focus and vision as much as they could, you know, that's good. And that was honest and authentic, which is really key. Products and services are areas there that you can look at. Again, I mentioned bolt-ons, or maybe, you know, being brave enough to say, I'm no longer going to offer this service because actually, do you know what, it's no longer relevant going forward. Delivery channels, you know, your routes to market may have changed. Maybe there's new opportunities to do a little bit more online. Technology, working from home, my goodness, you know, a lot of my clients thought that they wouldn't be able to do this as effectively and efficiently, and they're loving it. And then obviously office and premises in relation to leases, or, you know, perhaps with that working from home, you may not need as much space, or maybe you want to completely reconfigure your space and create maybe an innovation hub at the end of the floor, or if it's a smaller business that you may not need the first floor anymore, I don't know. But again, all I tried to do here in this 90-day planning aid memoir was to prompt to take you know, a series of various different headings and to lead you through a series of questions in order to support you and your small business at this very difficult time. So, you know, I just wanted, I suppose, to end on a quote from a wonderful mentor I was so privileged to work with over the years. Tom Savage passed away a couple of years ago now. He was a wonderful man. And he used to say to me the odd time, Valerie, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And I think it's really interesting. Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. None of us want this at the moment, if we're being honest. Nobody really wants this at the moment. But my goodness, look at the experience we're getting as a result of being able to think differently, dial up our resilience, and drive forward as leaders in small business. So thank you very much.
Valerie, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us and your own experience. And we really can see that these what you shared with us means a lot to you. But we also want to thank you for your invitation to coffee and to listen to you playing the piano for us. So really looking forward to doing this with you in 3 months' time at the end of our 90-day plan. But I have to say, Valerie, what you said about over-communicating and maintaining and protecting people's hopes, that really resonated with me, but also reminded me what I've heard from a good friend of mine, that obviously you have to be kind to others, but you have to be kind to yourself as well in a times of crisis. I mean, if I look at myself, that I tend to be very overcritical of me and my actions, and I'm questioning myself all the time. And then, well, especially in times of crisis, I try to remind myself to not to be too critical and to be more understanding, not only of others, but of myself as well. I'm not sure, but this is something that you observe as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I believe that, you know, first of all, anybody running a small business, or anybody, you know, that's in a leadership position, they tend to be high performers. You know, they're high performers, and high performers can be hard. We can be hard on ourselves. You know, I've got clients that I work with that are in this space, and as a result, they jump ahead and start to help others and to deal with things when they recognize there are times they need to take time out and need to get off that treadmill and create the space I was talking about earlier, that mental space and that clear space, in order to get a bit more clarity for themselves and to recognize they're doing a really good job. You know, it doesn't matter what age you are, you know, it's nice to get feedback like that. It doesn't matter how much experience, we all like to hear it from time to time. And sometimes the person who has to say it to you is yourself. And having that clarity, then again, you know, I really believe clarity breeds mastery. When you take time out to just reaffirm where you are, and then, you know, create a bit of clarity for yourself personally as a leader and a small business owner, and then for your team, it breeds mastery once you have that clarity. The clarity of thought is really powerful. And then your consistency in terms of your behaviors and how you follow through will make that a reality. So I think you're absolutely right. There are times when we can be very hard on ourselves, and it's okay to get off that treadmill from time to time, especially at the moment.
I also liked, Valerie, very much how you gently shifted the focus from the day-to-day that we have experienced over the last 5 or 6 weeks now to slightly more the medium term, the future of the 90 days. And I believe that's really ultimately so important when it comes now to the reopening phase of the economy, and then also rebooting, re-energizing the business. And I think that the templates that you have outlined to us will be of great help.
Well, thank you, Sven. And I love that word reboot, because and fair, you know, I know you've mentioned it to me before, and I love it because You know, we've been a couple of weeks at this now where we've had to be firefighting, you know, kicking contingency. We've had to make some very difficult decisions. We've had to make some very sensitive moves in relation to staff and what have you, or salaries, whatever that might be. And we've had to realise that actually the world is going to be totally different, not massively different, but it will be different. I don't mean that in a bad way. I think that there's going to be really good things that are going to happen in relation to how we take our businesses forward and what the world is going to look like. I'm quite excited about what might emerge there. But I think just, you know, there was a piece that I read last week about grit and determination, and I loved this piece. It was written by, it's actually a piece of research done by assistant professor of University of Pennsylvania called Angela Duckworth. And she talked about grit, and she said it's just as essential, if not more essential, than intelligence. And at the moment, what we need to do is to remind ourselves of grit, determination. You know, anybody who's running a small business, you know, there was a reason why you did it. There was a reason why you stepped forward to set up that business. And certainly, you know, that will certainly carry you through. And not to forget what you have inside you and where it took you to now. And to have the, you know, to have the courage and to go forward now, and to keep believing in yourself and that team around you. But also, Sven, as you mentioned, to reach out to people around you in your own ecosystem. Or you can contact me, you can contact Sven. You know, this is not about, you know, commerciality at the moment. It's about really helping people, because all of us are in this and all of us need support and guidance as we move forward, because we don't have all the answers. But the best leaders always look for support and guidance to be even even more successful in their roles. And, you know, I think that's a great attitude to have, that you don't have all the answers.
Well, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for your kindness and for you being so selfless and sharing your insights with us. And you can see Valerie's email address on this slide, as well as her phone contact details. We're going to share the slide deck with you this afternoon, together with the recording, and Valerie has kindly agreed to do a special webinar with us on the 90-day plan. So please keep an eye out on invitations for this webinar, which will be within the next 2 weeks. So thanks for everybody for listening. Thank you again, Valerie. Please all stay. Look after yourself, look after your families and your staff, and God bless. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.